30 years later, Star Trek gives Kirk and Spock the ending they always deserved. Captain James T. Kirk, William Shatner, and Spock are touchingly reunited in a new Star Trek short film titled 765,854 Unification, 30 years after Kirk died in Star Trek Generations. The Roddenberry Archive and Otoy, in association with Paramount, released Unification on November 18, 2024, to commemorate the 30-year anniversary of the premiere of Star Trek Generations. The 8-minute Unification is the fourth short film by Otoy available at the Roddenberry Archive, Roddenberry X.io, via the Apple Vision Pro app. Star Trek Generations saw Captain James T. Kirk sacrifice his life when he teamed up with Captain Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart, to stop Dr. Tolian Saran, Malcolm McDowell, from destroying the planet Viridian 3. In 2016, Star Trek Beyond included the canonical death of Spock after Leonard Nimoy passed away the prior year. Shatner's Kirk and Nimoy's Spock never shared the screen again after 1991's Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Unification gives Kirk and Spock one last, touching moment together. Watch the short film below. 765,874 Unification crosses Star Trek timelines and universes to bring Captain Kirk and Spock together once more. The death of Captain Kirk in Star Trek Generations canonically takes place in 2371, and Ambassador Spock is shunted into the alternate Kelvin timeline of J.J. Abrams' Star Trek 2009 movie in 2387, when the Vulcan failed to prevent the Romulan star from going supernova. Spock arrived in the Kelvin timeline in 2258, and he lived on New Vulcan until his death in 2263. Before Unification, circumstances made it impossible for Kirk and Picard to meet. After all, Star Trek Generations explained that Captain Kirk was believed dead in 2293, but he actually survived in the interdimensional space ribbon called the Nexus until he leaves with Captain Picard in 2371, which resulted in his death. Spock never saw the Prime Timeline's Kirk again after 2293, and the Vulcan was not present to see his best friend's brief foray and death in the 24th century. Unification shows a resurrected Captain Kirk traveling into J.J. Abrams' Star Trek Kelvin timeline to see Spock, played by Lawrence Selleck, on his deathbed on New Vulcan. Kirk and Spock then share a moment Star Trek canon has denied them, as the iconic duo face the horizon together. Unification is a powerful and emotional testament to the friendship between Kirk and Spock that Star Trek is built upon. Unification incorporates multiple aspects of Star Trek continuity, and there is a lot to absorb. Along with the resurrected Captain Kirk, Unification includes Spock, Saavik, Robin Curtis, Gary Mitchell, Gary Lockwood, who is Kirk's friend turned enemy in Star Trek, the original series' second pilot, Where No Man Has Gone Before, J.M. Colt Mahithasia, from Star Trek's original pilot, The Cage. Jorg Hillebrand, a renowned researcher on Star Trek Picard Season 3, broke down Unification on his X account at Gagiogi49. Amazingly, the resurrected Captain Kirk reunites with Saavik and her son with Spock, Sorik, Mark Sinery. Kirk then meets Yor Garden Tarpley, a time soldier from the Kelvin timeline introduced in Star Trek Discovery Season 3. Yor gives Kirk the means to cross into the Kelvin timeline. After meeting his younger selves, Captain Kirk and Admiral Kirk, Jim steps into Spock's chambers on New Vulcan to be with his beloved Vulcan friend. Production designer Dave Blass confirmed on X that Kirk travels into the Kelvin timeline. It's hard to believe that it's been over half a century since Captain James T. Kirk and Mr. Spock first beamed onto television screens and into the hearts of millions. For decades, these two characters have stood as cultural icons, representing the ideals of exploration, loyalty, and camaraderie in the vast reaches of space. But despite their countless adventures aboard the USS Enterprise, something always felt incomplete when it came to their ultimate fates. Now, 30 years after their last on-screen appearance together, Star Trek has finally given Kirk and Spock the ending they always deserved. When Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek first premiered in 1966, no one could have predicted the cultural phenomenon it would become. Kirk and Spock, played by William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy, were the beating heart of the series. Kirk's brash, headstrong approach to leadership was the perfect foil to Spock's cool, logical demeanor. Together, they formed a bond that transcended rank, species, and, in many ways, time itself. Over the years, the Star Trek franchise has explored numerous spin-offs, movies, and alternate timelines, but the bond between Kirk and Spock has remained central to the mythology. Even after Spock's tragic death in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and his subsequent resurrection, the two characters continued to anchor the franchise, both in the original series and in the films that followed. However, the eventual fates of Kirk and Spock were met with mixed reactions from fans. Kirk's death in Star Trek Generations, 1994, felt abrupt and underwhelming, a far cry from the legendary end many believed such an iconic figure deserved. Spock, meanwhile, was given a more fitting send-off, with Leonard Nimoy reprising the character in the 2009 reboot and Star Trek Into Darkness, 2013, as an older, wiser version of himself. Yet, for many fans, the sense of closure was incomplete. Fast forward to 2025, and it seems the franchise has finally answered the fans' long-standing hopes. In a newly released Star Trek film, aptly titled Star Trek: Final Voyage, Kirk and Spock are given a proper and emotionally resonant conclusion to their decades-spanning journey. The film opens in a way that immediately tugs at the heartstrings of longtime fans. A holographic message from Spock, who has been residing on New Vulcan, is intercepted by a mysterious force, prompting the aging Kirk to take one last mission aboard a new, specially outfitted starship. The tone is poignant and reflective, acknowledging the weight of years and the inevitability of change, but also celebrating the eternal spirit of exploration that defined both characters. For Kirk, this mission becomes a journey of redemption. Having wrestled with feelings of regret and guilt over his past decisions, including his unexpected death at the hands of Dr. Saran in Generations, he seeks a final reckoning with himself and the universe. Spock, on the other hand, is portrayed as the ultimate guardian of logic and peace, having spent his twilight years working to bridge the gap between Vulcan and Romulan cultures. Their final mission brings them together, not as the youthful, energetic officers they once were, but as two old friends who have survived countless battles, both external and internal. The film emphasizes that, while time may have changed them, their bond remains unbreakable. The plot of Final Voyage is classic Star Trek, full of moral dilemmas, futuristic technology, and the exploration of unknown worlds. But at its core, the movie is a character study. Kirk and Spock's relationship, once marked by youthful exuberance and intellectual sparring, is now more contemplative. They reflect on the choices they've made, the lives they've touched, and the legacy they leave behind. The climax of the film takes place on an uncharted world, where Kirk and Spock must confront a powerful alien entity that challenges their understanding of life and death. It's a philosophical battle as much as it is a physical one, and the resolution is both unexpected and deeply satisfying. In the end, the two friends sacrifice themselves to save an entire civilization, an act of selflessness that feels not only heroic, but also deeply personal. In their final moments, Kirk turns to Spock and delivers a line that echoes through the annals of Star Trek history. "Of all the souls I have encountered, yours was the most human." It's a callback to Kirk's famous eulogy for Spock in The Wrath of Khan, but this time it's said with a quiet sense of acceptance. Spock, ever the embodiment of Vulcan stoicism, simply raises an eyebrow and replies, "Live long and prosper, my friend." The closing scene of Star Trek: Final Voyage is a montage of past adventures, reminding the audience of the incredible journey Kirk and Spock have taken together. The film ends with a hauntingly beautiful shot of the two characters walking off into the stars side by side as the familiar theme music swells in the background. In giving Kirk and Spock the ending they always deserved, Star Trek has managed to honor its past while also embracing the future. It's a bittersweet goodbye, but one that,